What's up, friends? Julie here. I need to make a really quick painting today because I got requested to teach this for a bachelorette party coming up. And it's this really old painting that I made back when I very first started my paint party business. And it's a really simple painting, and it can be really pretty, but man, when I pulled this out, I was like, yikes, totally time to update this. Maybe this wasn't my original. I feel like I would have done a better job with my original, but for some reason, this is the only version I have. And now I work on bigger canvases, so I'm going to put it on this 16 by 20 canvas. Now, I'm repurposing this canvas. I have a nice hummingbird traced on there, but alas, sometimes you got to just paint over things and it's all good. So for the background on this painting, you can really use any colors you want. The mandatory ones are black and white. And I am going to use some dark blue and turquoise. And I found this amazing brush at the dollar store at Dollarama, and it is a 1.5-inch flathead brush. And I saw it and I was like, man, that brush is going to come in handy, and it's definitely going to come in handy to paint the background on this big canvas. I also have, this is about a 1/2-inch flathead brush here, if I can just get it in order. You can use anything that's smaller or around this size, works really well. I have my long liner brush, and just for funsies, I'm not really sure if I'm even going to use it, but I have my old toothbrush because I feel like we could make it kind of pretty. So really, all you have to do is grab your two favorite colors and some black and some white, and we can get down to business to make this super cute painting with very simple dollar store art supplies. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my big brush. I'm going to grab some water, mix it in on the side of my turquoise. I'm going to take a big old scoop of it, and I'm going to start to rifle it up and down on my canvas. And then I'm going to take a scoop of white and I'm going to mix it in. So I'm going to have all of these little streakies in the background. Some turquoise, a little bit of white, streak it out. So I'm just pulling up and down, and whenever I'm making a painting like this, where I have these up and down strokes, where I kind of want it to have like a, very, very loosely saying, like a wooden kind of vibe, I always say we're going for streaks, not stripes. So when we're mixing our colors on our canvas, it's easy to like grab some turquoise and put a big line of turquoise down. And then you grab some white and mix it with some of the turquoise. And then you grab some turquoise. So you end up having like white stripes that are like very, very symmetrical on your canvas. And I like to be a little more sporadic than that. I like to have like little streak pulls, kind of pulling in from random places. And you can always add a little bit of extra water onto your brush, add it into your paint to just help extend the life of your paint as well. So you can really move it around and not waste, especially if you're just doing a little quickie painting like I'm doing right now. We're gonna just let go of any kind of like, oh, I can't do this or like, oh, I've never been able to I don't trust my painting skills. We're just gonna let go of all of that because it's cockamamie and unnecessary. All you gotta do is get those arms moving, get those colors grooving, and feel the flow of going up and down with a paintbrush. That's all you need to focus on, because the colors will do the job. You got your turquoise, or maybe you're using pink or whatever colors, and mixing some white in there with it, and you get these really beautiful little streaks of white in the background. Not so complicated, right? So my canvas is full. I take a little step back and, I'm gonna add a little white right there. I'm gonna add a little white, kind of filling in some spaces. And when you are using dollar store supplies, you kind of got to be aware that if you stop halfway, you're going to get these weird little brush stroke marks in the background. And I mean, it's up to you. That actually looks good for certain kinds of paintings to make these nice little brush stroke marks. But for this painting, my brush strokes are going all the way from the top of my canvas down to the bottom, and I'm moving the paint up and down, full strokes from the top to the bottom. And then I don't get any of those weird, like, harsh halt marks while I'm doing this. Now, last but not least, I want there to be a little character, so this is where we can kind of experiment. And I like to do this while my paint is wet so I don't lose that, like, that liquidiness that I like. So, you know, adding a little bit of a darker color, either coming in from the bottom. Now, this could go both ways. You could use a darker color or a lighter color, but I feel like generally the darker color is going to show up just a little bit more vibrantly, especially when we're mixing wet paint together. As soon as things start to dry, you can start to kind of layer on top, but if everything's still wet, there's going to be a little bit of mixing happening, not looking super solid yet. It just kind of looks a little see-through, and that's okay. That's kind of what I'm going for right now. Can have some fun kind of pulling in these little tidbits from the bottom and also from the top. Yeah, and you know, it's your world, so like if you want to pull that blue down further or have a little less of it or more, honestly, the canvas is your oyster, my friend. And this, what I'm doing right now, is a practice that I often do. So when I'm starting to like realize like I think I'm good, and depending on the painting, but because I want to get this done pretty quickly, I'm going to go up and down across the canvas and move my paint back and forth so that it can dry a little faster. I'm moving it around. So this is a very thin coat of paint. There are no goobers on this canvas. And you know, at any time you can pull in bits of color in any spot you want, but just make sure you're petting it out all the way to those edges. And that's it. I'm going to let it dry. Nice work, friend. On to step 2. So step 2 is going to be putting our flowers on, and we have a couple different flowers that we're using. I'm going to start with the kind of closed flowers. So these guys here, I'll just place those as wherever I want, really, and then I'll come back and make all of the other little dandelion style flowers. Now on my canvas, I will say, like, if you have the time and care to add another coat of paint on top of your canvas, this is the time to do it. You can pause the video and give it a second coat of paint. Because I'm on a timeline, I'm not going to do that. I can see a little bit of my bird still poking through the background, but I'm just going to strategically place my flowers to try and not see it anymore. I'm going to just do my best to kind of hide it with some flowers. So whenever you're ready, I want you to take the smaller flathead brush that you have. And I always like to start with a little water. Not too much, just to kind of break it loose a little bit. And these flowers are really, 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 really simple. So grab some white, and we're basically working it with like 3 or 4 petals each flower. So what I do is start at the outside edge of the flower. I'll put my brush straight on the canvas, kind of push and pull in. And as I'm like leaving the canvas, I kind of twist my brush and I make a little point at the end. Okay. I will do this again. I start at the top, give my brush a little push, push, and then as I'm reaching the middle, I start to pull my brush to the side and bring it down to the same point here. I'm going to keep doing that. Now, for any petals that you feel aren't big enough, for example, okay, so this petal could definitely be a little bigger. I'm going to push and just widen it a little bit, but same brush stroke down to the center. And the petals can be connected. They don't have to be separated. And there's one. Now, I will say that this is a really big canvas, and it's definitely a lot smaller than the one that I was using previously. So with that in mind, you know, there's a rule that I like to follow that's, if you start small, you can always make something bigger. But if you make it really big, it's hard to make it smaller. So for something like this, that's just a basic shape. If I wanted my flower to be a little bigger, I would just get right in there, follow the same path, just widen it up a little bit so that my flower can take up a little bit more real estate on my canvas, maybe be a little bit more size appropriate for the canvas that I'm using. But I'm following the same shape. I'm just following the edges a little bit bigger than I did before. There you go. And now it's bigger. So I am going to make 2 or 3 more of these. Perfect. So now that we know where these kind of flowers are going to live, we're going to start to make our dandelion-y kind of flowers, our little wishy flowers. So still using white, what I like to do is I will get some water on my brush and I kind of side swipe my white. So I kind of grab it and pull. So I have half, there's a lot of water on my brush. I have half that doesn't have water or doesn't have paint and the other half does. And I'm just going to pick and choose some spots, but I'm going to start down here at the bottom. So I put my brush directly on the canvas and I kind of push around in a circle. So I'm taking my brush, the watery part is in the middle, the paint part is on the outside, and I wiggle my brush around in a little circle. And what that does, it makes this really cool faded interior inside here. So I'm just gonna wipe a little bit of that paint off. I can kind of like drag my brush around and let that white kind of seep into the middle. And I'm just gonna let that dry, but you know, make sure you like what the outside of your flower looks like. So this has a little bit, I would like it a little bit more bumpy around the edges to give it a little bit more character. And I'm just gonna leave it like that, okay? And let's do one more. So, a little bit of water. I'm gonna side swipe my white over here. So basically I have half water, half white on my brush. I'm gonna head over right here. The wet part is in the middle of the flower and I drag the white part around in a bumpy circle. So I'm just kind of wiggling my brush, kind of all around. You know, if it doesn't make it all the way, you can hop to the other side and kind of flip your brush over and kind of finish off that other side over there. And yeah, this is how we do it. Now, depending on how you kind of see your lens through the world, if you want, you can always grab a little bit more white and get in there and bring that a little closer to the center, right? Or you can leave it empty like this. It's up to you. Just grabbing a tiny little bit more white on that side and doing a little extra cruise on that outside edge to bring it a little bit closer. Make it a little bit more white in the center of our flowers. Perfect. So I'm going to make a few more of these, and then by the time I'm done, this should be dry and we can add a little bit more into it when it's ready. So now that I have all of my dandelion style flowers placed on the canvas, I'm going to give this 2 minutes to dry and come right back to it. Now, step 3 is simply going back where we came from and giving everything a little bit more loving and everything a little bit more solid foundation before we add the rest of our stems on and stuff like that. So I'm going to go back with my brush here, start right back at the top. I'm going to grab some white and I'm just going to give a quick, really quick second coat of paint to all of my flowers. For my dandelions, I'm going to do roughly the same thing, but just maybe a little bit more texture. So I love the shape of my flowers. I love how they have the middle that kind of blends into the background. You can still see like they're erythral. You can, kind of iridescent. And what I like to do is I'll put a little extra water on my brush and do that same kind of side swipe where I'm just kind of getting a little bit of paint on my brush and very, very lightly making little taps and darkening in those little side pieces of my dandelion. I want it to still gradient itself into the middle. So I'm obviously, if I start to get a little bit too much paint there, just take my finger and kind of give it a little wipe. But I'm going to give a little extra leaven to all of the outsides. A little bit of texture. So I'm just using the little corner of my brush, that sharp corner of my flathead. I'm sure you could use any brush, but like I have my 3 favorites, my big, medium flathead brushes and my nice long liner brush are always the brushes that I use for my parties, like 90% of the time. Every once in a while we use like a bristle brush or a toothbrush. I'm not sure if you can hear, but it is storming like crazy out right now. The wind is howling and the rain is coming down, and I was actually making this video on my computer and then it shut down on me because the power went out. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to make it on my phone instead. So the power can't shut off on me. I guess if the lights go out, that definitely still won't work. Anyways, okay, so I did a little outside coat on all my flowers. They look a little more solid. They have a little bit more texture. My white flowers definitely look a lot less see-through and white, way brighter and whiter. So again, I'm going to give this a few minutes to dry and we'll start to incorporate our black into the scenario. All right, time to learn how to make nice, beautiful, long black lines with a nice long liner brush. And the way I like to do this is I have my paint here. It's just paint and it's good. And a lot of times I see people just putting a tiny little bit of paint on their brush and trying to make lines, and they get all choppy. They're no good. They run out of paint. So this is how we don't do that. I grab my brush. I'm going to grab 1, 2, 3, at least 4, maybe 5 drops of water right next to my black paint, and I mix it in. Just the side. So whenever it starts to kind of get thick and mucky again, I can add just more drops of water right to this little ink pool I have here. And I am going to fill my brush up. So the whole thing is full. Give a little tap, tap, tap-a-roo on my plate. And now that my brush is full of nice liquidy black paint to the brim, as I create my long lines, it's going to continue to filter down to that tip. So we're just using the tip of our brush to create kind of wiggly lines here. I'll show you this original one here. Crisscrossing through the applesauce in here, and sometimes, you know, they just hop in behind. You can totally bring your lines right up to the flowers, but we're kind of working in behind our flowers here. So starting with a lower one, because this is going to give you a good indicator if you have enough paint or enough water added into your brush. So truly, you should be able to start at this dandelion and wiggle down at least to the end of your canvas. Okay, so take a deep breath. All right, at least. So, you know, when I fill up my brush, I kind of give it a little twist. I twist it on my plate, give it a little tappy so it doesn't drip everywhere. And I'm gonna do right here, right? I'm gonna right past it. See, it started to dry up at the end there. Okay, again. It's almost like little balloons. Oh. All crisscross applesauce in here. Now, the difference, well, actually, these still need stems too, so same deal. I'm just trying to be a little bit, have some fun with it. So where are these stems coming from? They're really coming from all the places, like they're kind of growing out of all the little crevices of the field or the ditch or wherever they're coming out of. Wow, that's a lot of stems. You know what? I think I might have doubled up. In the original, I would use this stem, like the same one for this whole thing. So I have a lot of extra stems on my canvas right now, but that's okay. And once I have those stems down, I can do the same. Now, I want to outline my flowers, and I do want to use that same kind of liquidiness, but maybe just a little less. So I'll kind of incorporate a little bit more paint into my little ink pod here. And when I get it to the canvas, I'm going to be very gentle. I'm just going to use the very tippy tip of my brush. I'm just deciding which one I want to work on here. And I always anchor my hand. So like, you know, make sure that you have a solid surface. Sometimes it's hard to be way back here and try and outline things. So I like to put my pinky down, at least until I get my bearings. So when I'm getting started, just so like I start in the right place, and as I kind of find a flow, I work it out. So you can see I just start with the very tip, and I can push a little harder as I reach the top part, and then I loosen up a little bit as I kind of bring my brush stroke down into my petal. Something of the sorts. And I'm going to take my brush, and I'm just going to gently kind of pull up a few little fireworks from the center of my flower here. Now, if you want, you can absolutely finish off all of these petals. That was me because I was struggling. I wanted to say leaves, like so bad. You can connect them all, or you can keep them unconnected. So I'll show you what I mean by that. Grab a little more paint. You know, as I'm kind of moving along, I let my brush kind of push and pull out, get a nice little wiggle on it, so that my lines look like they're having fun. They're not so rigid, they're not so perfect, they're just kind of swaying in the wind. The answer, my friend, is swaying in the wind. The answer is swaying in the wind. Now, I'm not gonna lie, like using this this long liner brush, it can take some time to get used to. It's a really long bristle, and sometimes it can get away from you. So, you know, it might take a little bit of practice to just find your flow with it. Just take your time and don't be so judgmental. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of practice to really gather your bearings for the different brushes that you're using. But by far, the long liner brush is perfect for all of these long lines that we're making here. Go figure. And voila, everything is outlined. Step 4, putting the final details on. And basically that just means we're going to put a whole bunch of dots on the canvas. So in the centers of each one of my dandelions, I just take a little scoop of white, and I like to do a little kind of mini little scribble in the middle. I don't make a point or a dot exactly. I just a little push and scribble with the end of my liner brush. That's it. And now my dandelions have a little middle in them. And in my original piece, I usually there's a couple ways we can do this. You can flip around to the wooden end of your paintbrush handle and add little bits of magical pollen that's floating everywhere, right? You can use the white, the black, the turquoise, the blue, whatever colors you have. You can totally go grab some extra dots, some little pieces of pollen flowing in the wind. Right? Good times. And that's why I brought in my toothbrush. I thought maybe if I put a couple splatters on there, that might be kind of cool too. So I'm going to try it. It might not work out, but let's see what happens. So I put a little water on my toothbrush. I'm going to grab some white and kind of brush it on my palette a little bit. And then I'm going to be gentle about it because I don't really want too much white to go on top of my black outlines. But if I just do it's kind of like a flower celebration. Adding little bits onto the canvas. And that's that. So when you're done with your piece, what I want you to do, I want you to take your paintbrush, make sure you put your signature on it to make sure everybody knows that you're the one who made it. I want you to take a picture and I want you to post it in the Julie's Paint Party public Facebook group. Or head over to juliespaintparty.com/JPPVM and find out more about our community membership program. Okay, see you soon. Bye.